Hello. In this video, we are going to elaborate a bit more on the definition of component data manually using an Excel, the pre-formatted Excel sheet. And we have mentioned in the introduction video that essentially the building components and content can be defined in a manual explicit way, and alternatively you can use implicit or available loss EDP functions that are available in literature, and essentially those two that are implemented in EaRL. So for the manual definition, we mentioned that for this one you can actually use the drop-down menus over here to start adding components to your component table over here one by one, or alternatively you can do this using the supporting documents and using the template component data sheet that's already pre-formatted in order to define this over here, and then using the import from Excel button over here to essentially migrate this data inside this module. So again, I will elaborate a bit on how to define the things here in this sheet. So again, there is two sheets inside this Excel file. One that must be called component data, component underscore data. The other sheet is the one called the database, and essentially this one, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction video, that this contains the ID of the component inside the incorporated FEMA P58 database. So there are essentially around 767 components. This is the name of the component. This is the number of damage states inside each component, and this is the controlling EDP for each component. And in this column you have the costing unit or type. So essentially each one of these components, and this is very important, the parameters of its fragility consequences, damage consequences. So for instance, the values for the repair cost, the specified values for the repair cost, the specified values for the associated repair time for a given damage state, the values for essentially the number of injuries or the casualties. Everything that's defined for a given component is based on some unit number or quantity of units from this component. So for instance here, if I zoom a bit, if I'm looking at bolted gravity shear connections, we see here that based on the FEMA P58 database, you see that the costing here, so everything related to the damage state consequences, are based on connection. So the values are given for the repairing or associated with one connection. Other components, they may be based on something else. Like for instance, if I'm looking here at curtain walls, for instance, like concrete walls, this one over here, you see that the costing is based on not the number of units, but it's based on the surface area of the wall panel. So here, this is the values would be based on 900 square feet. Other will be based on the linear length of something. So again, the costing unit, it differs from one component to another, and this you will need to be aware of this when defining the component data. Why is that? Well, when you are defining the component data, you will need the following information. First, you will need to specify the component ID, which is essentially this value over here, this index value over here. So you need to specify this at any point. So I can say, like, for instance, 312 or something like that. And when you do that, when you add a new ID, automatically all these grayed out columns in the Excel sheet, you don't add anything here. This will be automatically populated with the name of the component and the costing quantity or the costing unit. So for instance, here when I say 312, it tells me that this is a mid-rise stick-built curtain wall, and again some other properties of this wall, and it says that the costing is based on 1 unit. This means that if I say here that this wall, okay, this would be situated at each story, since walls are between floors, so it's based on a story. And let's say that this is exists in each story, so I can just write typical. So this is a shortcut. Instead of doing multiple entries and saying every time a name of a number of a different story, I can just say typical. And when this gets imported into EaRL, EaRL will understand that this is this kind of component is present at every story. The last thing that you need to provide is the number of units /length /area. And if you see here, it says that the values must be specified in the same units of the project. So for instance, here the costing, it says that the costing is based on 1 unit. This means that I just need to specify the number of units. And inside EaRL, this number of units will be divided by the costing quantity to compute essentially the number of total units from this curtain wall. So if I say here I have 100, this means inside EaRL, this 100 will be divided by, this 100 will be divided by 1, which is this value over here, the costing quantity or the costing unit, and this will give me 100 components from, or 100 curtain walls essentially at each. So this value for each story. So you just need to provide the value at each story. Again, here, if I look at, let's say, the first one that I have here, so I have component ID number 1, which is the bolted shear tab connection, which is, again, the costing is based on a connection basis. So the costing quantity is essentially 1. So I put here 48. So this means 48 will be divided by 1, and this will give me 48 connections at each floor. If I look at something different, like for instance, let's say the corrugated slab over here. So the corrugated slab, this is the ID, I put it right here. So then I have a corrugated slab, and the costing here is based on slab area of 10.764 square feet. So this means that the value I need to put here, it need to be a value of area, essentially. So here I put like 1400 square feet. And this 1400 square feet, when it will be divided by 10.764, this will give me the number of pieces, essentially, or units of this corrugated slab that would be considered at each floor. So the 1400 here is square feet, but it doesn't have to be square feet. It just needs to be in the same units as your project. So if you're using imperial, this will be square feet. If you're using SI units, this will be in square meters. Even though that the costing is will always be based here, for instance, on square feet. If I see, for instance, here that the costing for the wall partition, again, the costing for the wall partition, this is component ID number 374. for the wall partition, gypsum type. So the costing is based upon one 9 feet by 100 feet panels. So essentially the costing is based on one of those panels. So if I put the number of 9 feet by 100 feet panels that will be used at each story, then this 600 will be divided by 1, again, one panel that has the following dimension. Then I will get 600 wall partitions at a given story. Again, here the suspended ceiling, for instance, the suspended ceiling, again, the costing is based on, as it says here, it's based on 2500 SF, which is square feet, essentially. So if I put here the value, this will be the area. So this value will be divided by 2500, and this will give me how many pieces or cost quantities or cost units will be used at a given floor. Fire sprinklers, this component number 569. So fire sprinkler water piping, for instance, this one is based on, the costing is based on a 1,000 feet segment of the pipe. So here I put 1,536 feet. This is the length, essentially, again in the units of the project. If it's in meter, I will just put this value in meters. So this value will be divided by the 1,000, and then this will give me the number of pieces of 1,000 feet segment pipes at each floor. Now, if you are using, again, let's assume that you are doing this in SI units. So instead of putting 1,536 feet, you will put this value after you convert it into meters. But inside EaRL, the converted value, which would be in meters, will be divided not by 1,000 actually. No, it will be divided inside EaRL with the conversions of 1,000 feet into meters. So you don't need to worry about this value. This will be automatically taken care of inside EaRL. So you just need to make sure that this value, whatever it is, an area or a length, it has to be in the units of your project. The rest will be taken care of inside EaRL. So that's it. Just by doing this, essentially for all the components that you have inside your building, you can define these values. The most important part is the specification of the number of units or the length or the area of your given component based on the cost unit quantity. This is the most important part that you need to do it carefully in order to get the right number of units of a given component in your building, and then the costing and the repair time, everything will be computed correctly. So this needs to be done carefully, this part. And actually, if you are doing this in a manual way, using the drop-down menus, again, the same situation will happen. Like, for instance, if you use the drop-down menu to select a given component. So for instance, here, if I use roofing and I'm using concrete tile, roof tiles secured and compliant with UBC 94, let's say we're using this component. Once you select a component, you will see here in this panel, in this window over here, this is the tip window. It will give you a description of the cost unit and what you need to do. So it says here that the repair cost for this component is based on a predefined unit floor area of 100 feet square. Therefore, the number of units that you need to specify essentially here in this field, they will need to be calculated as the building floor area divided by the associated cost unit floor area. And then it says that you do not need to specify the number of units for these components, okay, because automatically the value that has been generated here is actually the floor area that you specified when you define the building data. However, if you want to override this, you can change this value, which it says here. You have the option, however, to override the assigned floor area for this component. So again, since this is a component that's based on area, then you will need to specify the value here of the area, which will be divided by this value in order to find the number of units. So I hope that this is clear. Again, so the same applies for anything that you choose. If I choose again, like let's say masonry chimney, in this case it says here that the repair cost for this component is associated with 1 unit. So you just need to specify the total number of units per story or floor. So again, using this tip box that shows over here, the text here, it will give you a clear identification of what is what value that you need to provide. The label here above this field will change based on the component. So right now it says number of units. If we go back to the concrete tile, it says area feet square. So you can just understand what's happening here and then put the correct value. If I click this, whenever you see this type of black button with a yellow question mark, so this is again this is a tip button. If I click on it, so it tells you exactly what you need to do. So essentially at the beginning you need to select structure or non-structure components. So first the category, then you select the component, then you select the story or floor at which this component exists. So again from here, like story number 1 or story typical, you select this from here, and then you select the number of units, or you specify the number of units per story floor of component units, and then you click entry in order to add it to your component table that you see over here, right, as I did right now. If you want to clear the table, if you did something and then you say, okay, I don't want this. Let's say that right now we added this concrete tile roof, but you found out that, okay, I think I did a mistake. Actually, you can modify the values directly in the table. So for instance, instead of 1400, let's say I just want this to be 10,000. So you can modify the value of the units directly over here. So now let's say that you have already also added some component by mistake, or you want to delete one of these entries. So for instance, if I want to delete this hydraulic elevator, so I just need to put the index of the row index here, number 11, and just I need to say delete data, and then it will be removed from my table. Again, the same applies to everything inside here, and after you finish, then you click submit, and then everything will be fully defined. So I hope that this clarifies the manual component, manual definition of the building components and contents. It's a very straightforward procedure. Of course, we will keep updating this interface in order to make it even more intuitive and more interactive in future releases of EaRL. Thank you.